a huge explosion in Oxfordshire in the United Kingdom. Let's take a look at this because we do have some very fiery visuals. You can see this is a pretty significant situation. Witnesses reported seeing a fireball light up the night sky after the blast. The producer says we do have some video.
Oh my God. That is flipping massive.
That is crazy.
Richard, have authorities established the cause of this explosion?
Nerdrotic.com.
White cloth can be dyed, the white page can be overwritten, and the white light can be broken.
In which case it is no longer white, and he that breaks a thing to find out what it is has left the path of wisdom.
And he or she that breaks a thing because they despise what it is has entered the path of failure. Because the Rings of Power Season 2 has become the living embodiment of our expectations were low, but holy f***. After following up a Season 1 where they lost 63% of their viewers with a Season 2 that could be worse. And as predicted, of the 37% that were left, they've lost 45% so far. But this is a failure Amazon earned. Years ago, I warned them against making an enemy out of the Tolkien fandom, who are more than happy to bandy crooked words with witless worms to roast them into oblivion. And shame on Amazon, the scholars, the Tolkien Society, the shills, and the Tolkien estate for supporting such a derisive and subversive adaptation of the professor's work. So let's get to the Rings of Power Season 2 that features a troll based on Mike Ehrmantraut from Breaking Bad and a Sauron origin story that will be like Walter White from Breaking Bad that ultimately turned into Breaking Tolkien. Previously on the Rings of Power.
This mark's very existence proves Sauron escaped.
The evil is gone.
You have not seen what I have seen.
Looks can be deceiving.
There is a tempest in me.
My people have no king.
You are more than you claim. Your people have no king, for you are him.
Some of us will fall, but as brothers, in our home.
Anybody bring any extra bags?
No, nobody brought an extra bag.
Come with me to Middle-earth, and together we will redeem both our bloodlines.
Be careful, Elf. I am not the hero you seek.
Give me the meat, and give it to me raw.
A few inches later.
My name is Daryl Weathers, and I'm with the Construction Workers Union. I work with a lot of fine men who have families to feed. Now, I don't know about y'all, but we worked long and hard to get our pay up to a level where we can make a decent living.
And these knife ears took our jobs.
Yeah, they're down. Well, they took our jobs.
There is no king of the Southlands. The line was broken. Tell me your name.
I have had many names.
Sauron lives because of you!
Wait till you see the... No, 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 no.
Look at his lips.
And a year full of repurposed sequels and prequels filled with repurposed dialogue and scenes, it shouldn't surprise anyone that the Rings of Power Season 2 Episode 1's very first line is Sauron repurposing some Gandalf dialogue from the books.
But stories are told of Sauron's fall long, long ago.
That is so, but always, after a respite, the shadow takes another shape and grows again.
Always after a defeat, the shadow takes another shape and grows again.
And no, obviously this isn't Charlie Vickers' Halbrand / Sauron. It's a flashback with some pudgy guy who looks like he just got back from a Ren fair. Retardatar, the Lord of Snacks. In the books, after the defeat of Morgoth, Sauron lays low for a few hundred years and not much is known until now. Thank Eru, we have the keen minds at Amazon, including their all-female director staff, to give us the untold story. Turns out Fatatar, the Lord of Ding Dongs, is going to take over for Morgoth and crown himself the new Dark Lord. And his coronation is in front of a crowd of orcs that quite frankly look good. Unfortunately, they're for a modern audience. They're kinder, they're gentler, they're misunderstood. And they just want to hang out with their Papa Adar, one of many characters Amazon completely made up, formerly portrayed by Joseph Mawley. He's one of 2 actors who had the good sense to leave this show after season 1. And what do you know it? Sauron gets betrayed by recast Adar. And Sauron, the great dark sorcerer, master of phantoms and shadows, lord of werewolves, slayer of the king of Gondor, Elendil, slayer of High King Gil-galad, oops, spoilers, gets Caesared by a dozen sensitive orcs. And this all happens in a fortress in Fadadwaith, which, if you remember, is the same fortress where Guy Ladriel killed an ice troll in under 10 seconds.
And for you, Legolas, this is a new bow, so that you may kill a troll as quickly as I did, in under 10 seconds.
Anywho, Sauron turns into the Venom symbiote, eats a rat, a millipede, and a peasant woman, and turns into Halbrand. So Tolkienian. And since Tolkien is so slow and prodding with his multiple invented languages, his meticulous world building, and that pesky characterization, Amazon decided to speed things up a bit.
One of the people who every time I look at something, it looks like it could be improved. You know, there's something wrong with it.
And instead of Sauron laying low for 500 years, it's like a day. After that, Sauron runs into an NPC who speaks fluent platitude.
There's another life waiting for you. You just have to turn toward it. But our fates are never certain, and fortunes can turn for even the most powerful. A sure path may crumble, but there's always another. Often, it can lead us someplace better.
What? And in the very next scene, which is probably that night, they know each other so well, Mr. Platitude knows when he's having bad dreams.
Nightmares again? What haunts you so?
Of the legal.
All of us have done things that we care not to admit.
And this just so happens to be the ship that gets destroyed by the monster from season 1 that puts Sauron on a raft where he meets Guy Ladriel in the middle of the ocean. Now, why on Middle Earth would you want to remind anyone that that scene actually happened? But the only explanation is they're proud of it. That's right, Galadriel, who was hunting Sauron, runs into him in the middle of the ocean. They eventually end up on a ship. So you can ship Galadriel and Sauron, get it? Don't believe me? In an official promo from Amazon for the Rings of Power Season 2, they mention Halandriel. The Halandriel tease, I love you! Oh! For shipping Sauron and Galadriel. And did you hear that noise? That was Tolkien's grave exploding again. Here's an idea. Why don't you ship Galadriel with, say, her husband Celeborn, who's very much alive in the books? And it's time for another repurposed scene. Remember when Arwen was chased by the Nazguls in Lord of the Rings? Except this time, it's Guy Ladriel chasing Doogie Elrond. Now, Guy Ladriel is trying to get the 3 Rings of Power from Elrond, who wants to destroy him because Guy Ladriel conveniently left behind a scroll that tells everyone that Halbrand was Sauron. Eventually, Guy Ladriel and Doogie Elrond end up in High District Manager Gil-galad's office. And the jig is up, and Guy Ladriel finally has to admit that Halbrand is Sauron. She knew it and didn't tell them. He played a part in the forging of the Rings of Power, and she wanted to jump his Barad-dûr. Now, in the books, the 3 Rings of Power, Narya, Nenya, and Vilya, were the last Rings of Power forged alone by Celebrimbor without Sauron's direct influence prior to the forging of the One Ring. So they acted differently, and their purpose was to slow the natural decaying of the world. But because Amazon knows better in this show, they forged the 3 Elven Rings of Power first. And it's only because it was Guy Ladriel's idea, and the Master Smith of Middle-earth, Celebrimbor, just learned about this thing called alloy from Sauron. Aside from the fact that within the frame of this show, every bad thing that happens now is directly Guy Ladriel's fault for not telling anybody Halbrand was Sauron, she gets a slight talking to from High District Manager Gil-galad, who now demands that Elrond give back the rings. Instead of doing that, Doogie Elrond acts as a surrogate for the audience and jumps off a cliff. Now, in Tolkien's secondary world, many elves have fallen from high places and died, but this is a world where they can survive pyroclastic flows. But it's time we check in on female Frodo and the stranger who's totally not Gandalf, and in the interest of saving time, we're now going to call him Dangalf. And mystery boxing this guy's name for over a season and a half is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen in storytelling. And their scene opens up with some more mind reading.
Got that look in your eye. You had that dream again last night, didn't you?
Didn't we just see that?
Nightmares again?
Is there a fucking echo in here?
After a scene where they clearly want to push eat the bugs.
I can feel the legs in the throat.
That's the best part. They're dancing.
It's time to repurpose more of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. Remember the two towers?
It can't be. Still trees. We're going in circles.
This looks strangely familiar.
Because we've been here before. We're going in circles.
Remember when Sam and Frodo were followed by Gollum? It turns out they're also being followed by some Easterlings who look like something out of Farscape, a show that is 1,000 times better with 1,000th of the budget. Now, of course, Doogie Elrond survives and he goes to a character that we've been waiting to see, Círdan the Shipwright, a ring bearer, an elf with a beard, the oldest and wisest of their kind. You know how I know this?
Please forgive the unexpected nature of my visit, but I have nowhere else to turn. You are the oldest and wisest of our kind.
Who walks up to anybody and says this? Hey Garrett, you're the reasonably intelligent and quarter blackest of our kind. Doogie Elrond tells Círdan he wants to destroy the rings, and because it's been a few minutes, it's time for some more repurposed dialogue.
The rings must be destroyed.
Do so, and the age of the elves will end. We would be abandoning all Middle-earth to its fate.
The time of the elves is over. Do we leave Middle-earth to its fate?
After discovering Círdan's gonna destroy the rings, High District Manager Gil-galad blackpills and gathers the elves to leave Middle-earth, despite knowing that Sauron is back. But Gil-galad is a good High District Manager because he manages to get this done in half a day. But what do you know it, right when they're singing their goodbye hymn, Círdan shows up with the Rings of Power saying that they work. And despite this show taking the 6'4" Galadriel, the embodiment of femininity and grace, the Lady of Lothlorien, the Lady of Light, and turning her into a midget warrior woman, the commander of the northern armies, Galadriel, the girl Barian, the Lady of Fight, the woman who helped Sauron return and then hid that fact, the ring Nenya chooses her. And then we get our money shot with the Rings of Power, which looks like it went on a little too long. Look at all those shaking hands. And just like that, Lindon is healed. All the black ooze is gone. Now, earlier on in the episode, the wise and noble High King Gil-galad composed the most important message in Middle-earth in half a millennia, telling Grandma Brimbor that Halbrand is Sauron. Sure, it's something Galadriel could have told him, but that's not important right now. So what does the wisest and noblest of elf leaders do? Does he send out multiple elves to make sure the message makes it, or does he just give it to one guy and say, it'll be fine? If you guessed the latter, you're watching The Rings of Power on Amazon Prime. I sure hope nothing happens to that guy, because that would thwart the master plan of our thirst trap Dark Lord. So let's circle back to Sauron while he circles back from Mordor to Eregion, so Amazon Prime can circle back to the lore. After heading down to the shiny and brand new Mordor, Sauron does his best Moses impression.
Let my people go.
And Sauron's big master plan is to convince Adar that he's still the king of the Southlands, which he does, and to convince Adar to send him back to Eregion with the elves so he can stop Sauron, who he totally isn't, which he does. And on the way out the door, he gets poor Waldrig killed. You know, the guy who just wanted to follow Sauron and helped create Mordor in an afternoon. Also, he could go back and forge the rest of the Rings of Power, which he should have done in the first place, as Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, which they should have done in the first place, which was something apparently they added in at the last moment.
But we didn't know we'd do the Anatar thing. That was something that came to the piece quite late on.
Give me the meat.
Back to Galadriel, who has a vision of Celebrimbor, who basically blames her for everything that's about to happen.
What news?
I've had an unexpected visitor.
He has returned already.
Are they not the seeds you planted?
He ain't lying.
And the reason she's having these visions is because the rings have rekindled them. Oh, what's that? It's time for some more repurposed dialogue.
You believe the rings have kindled your ability to see that which has not yet come to pass.
And some things that have not yet come to pass.
But now High District Manager Gil-galad is finally going to do something now that he knows who Sauron is, no thanks to Galadriel. So they plan to attack the brand new shiny Mordor. How do they know Sauron is there?
What of the whereabouts of Sauron?
Our spies indicate that Sauron was last seen traveling into Mordor.
I mean, I'm not sure how, seeing that No one knew who Sauron was at the end of season 1 when he entered Mordor. Would he have just thousands of elves hanging around the mountains? And how in the hell did they miss all those orcs digging trenches from season 1? And how would they know what Halbrand looked like? Despite the show being long and prodding, it obviously borrowed the teleporter from the later seasons of Game of Thrones, and you have no idea how much time has passed. But at least those elven spies hanging out in mountains and recognizing people they've never seen before can at least send messages that get received. Because wouldn't you know it, that one lone guy with the most important message in Middle-earth for the last 500 years, Halbrand is Sauron, gets killed. That was a lucky break for the Dark Thirst Lord. Now, credit to the show, they did mention in passing that other messages have been sent to Grandma Brimbor, but they've been unanswered.
Our letters to Celebrimbor have all gone unanswered. I fear Sauron may be in Eregion.
Now, did High District Manager Gil-galad do anything about it? Nah. Galadriel had to talk him into it. And that's a good thing because Halbrand goes back to Eregion, where everyone is clueless that he's Sauron.
Well, isn't that convenient for you?
And after playing hard to get for a little while, Grandma Brimbor invites Sauron in to manipulate and seduce him into creating more rings that they should have made before the Elven rings. And as far as this statement from the showrunners is concerned,
so many of us in the LGBT community see ourselves in Tolkien's writings. Any chance we'll see ourselves on the show?
Maybe you have already.
Grandma Brimbor is my pick. Hey, guess who's back? Back again. Slim Lady's back. Tell a friend. And apparently everyone outside of Eregion knows that Sauron is back and that he's taken a new form.
Sauron's shadow is deepening. It is said he has taken a new form to deceive his enemies.
And Feminem works for a dark wizard in Rune that either Amazon made up, or worse, they're going to do something stupid like make him the Witch King of Angmar. And before anyone says that doesn't make any sense, for one, you're right, but that hasn't stopped him. Case in point, the possibly made up dark wizard and Feminem are after Dangal, female Frodo, and female Sam. They send out some bad guys from Mad Max, no, not the real Mad Max, Fury Road or Furiosa. And this gives them another opportunity to give us some repurposed scenes. The bad guys from Furiosa eventually catch up with Dangal, female Sam, and female Frodo at a well, and I can't imagine anything bad happening here. It just has a giant flag with the Eye of Sauron on it. And this brings us to my favorite scene in all 3 of the premiere episodes. Dangal picks up a stick, creates a dust devil that blows away the bad guys from Furiosa and female Sam and female Frodo. This brings us to the second most cringe-inducing moment in this series, the reveal of Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, who should have been in season 1, but Amazon really had to ship Haladriel, and the shape-shifting Lord of Werewolves, Phantoms, and Shadows, the mighty Sauron the Great, puts on a wig. And then he says this.
The Lord of the Rings. What, we some kind of...
Lord of the Rings.
Oh, and if you thought the repurposing was over, oh, my sweet summer child, the man who cut the ring from Sauron's hand, Isildur, surprisingly enough, didn't die at the end of season 1. Apparently, he was caught by Shelob.
You know, Isildur wakes up in a spider cape and has to fight Shelob in the first sequence, so...
And not just any Shelob. Ungoliant is a primordial being that formed into a giant spider that helped Melkor destroy the trees of Valinor, who also happens to be an ancestor of Shelob, and I'm still holding out for baby Shelob. And my prayers have been answered, according to the Nerdist from Maxim Baldry. So was that Shelob you fight in episode 3? In episode 3, it's Shelob. It's baby Shelob. Oh, fuck off! Aside from all the aforementioned problems with this show, one of its biggest is being packed with characters you could give a crap about, meandering around in an uninteresting, unengaging, creative, bankrupt story that's filled with and-thens. And then Isildur finds his horse, meets a girl I could give a crap what her name is, and runs into Dawn Lemonless. This brings us to the second person who had the good sense to leave this show after season 1, the actress whose name I cannot pronounce who played Bronwyn, because she dead. And it's a damn shame we're not going to get that Guess Who's Coming to Second Breakfast. And now Dawn Lemonless is a single dad to Theo, that's at least until he goes out to get some pipeweed and never comes home. One of the worst travesties of this show, which there are many, is the Númenóreans. And their moob armor, they're all supposed to be an average height of 6'4", and Elendil is supposed to be almost 8 feet tall, that's why they call him Elendil the Tall. Instead, we get a bunch of people who look like YouTubers. Now, to be fair to Amazon, they have to play it fast and loose with the timeline. The events from the books that this fanfic is derived from happens just a little bit after the forging of the Rings of Power, but it's not long, only 1800 years. And instead of Ar-Pharazôn forcing his cousin Muriel into marriage to seize the throne, Amazon has chosen a different path because they wouldn't want to rob Muriel of her agency. It sounds like it's pretty easy to become a king in the Rings of Power. You either need to steal a necklace or stand next to an eagle. Unfortunately, Amazon missed an opportunity to fix what Peter Jackson didn't do in his films. The eagles can talk. Now, one of the few compliments I gave the Rings of Power was the looks of the dwarves and Khazad-dûm. Unfortunately, their storyline was incredibly boring and it was filled with the first female dwarf of color in this show, Disa. Literally. The show insinuates Sauron causes an earthquake that collapses the sun shafts of Khazad-dûm, making it impossible for the famous vegetarian dwarfs to grow their crops. But let's be real, Disa could probably skip a couple meals.
You think this is about food?
Yup!
And despite the dwarves hollowing out an entire mountain, the Dwarven Health and Safety Inspector says they can't dig new sun shafts. Other than that, the rest of the dwarf storyline is wasted with Disa yapping and waiting for Durin the Fourth to talk to his dad, Durin the Third. But they're in luck. Thanks to Sauron, Grandma Brimbor offers the dwarves a deal. You give us Mithril, we'll make you some rangs. Hey, remember Peter Jackson's The Hobbit?
Harold Elrond said he'd think of little else than helping his dwarven friends. He speaks of you so fondly.
Funny, he's never mentioned you.
You have your grandfather's bearing. I knew Thror when he ruled under the mountain.
Indeed. He made no mention of you.
Eventually, the Durins reconcile and agree to the deal, and the forging of the Rings of Power out of order has begun. It looks like Season 2 is going to be the character assassination of Sauron, just like Season 1 was the character assassination of Galadriel, but they're not quite done with her yet. Galadriel finally has to come to terms with something she never had to deal with in the books: falling under the influence of Sauron. Now, Tolkien is famous for a lot of things, but mostly for his use of language. It is unequaled, while the Rings of Power's use of dialogue is a good argument for AI. From the writing staff that gave us this banger.
Do you know why a ship floats and a stone cannot?
What?
A ship has a secret. For unlike the stone, her gaze is not downward but up, fixed upon the light that guides her.
Keep in mind, these writers went on strike to get more money so they can give us more of this.
Sauron used me, and under his hand I was played like a harp to a melody not of my choosing.
And yes, they're really leaning into the shipping, and this is character assassination right up there with Indiana Jones and the Dial of Dysentery, Han Solo in The Force Awakens, Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, and the Doctor in Doctor Who.
Sauron looked inside you, plucked the very song of your soul, note by note, making himself out to be exactly what you needed, the lost king who could ride you to victory.
Things go well, I might be showing her my O face. Oh. You know what I'm talking about. Oh.
But wait! There's more!
After all the talk of morally gray characters on the red carpet, we have the single most cringe-inducing scene in this show: nuanced orcs in Tolkien.
We are safe here. We have a home. Must we go to war again?
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Tell you that we will never truly be safe until we've made certain Sauron is no more.
But you guys just don't understand. The orcs just want to multiply, raise their kids, be evil, and practice their corrupted form of life in peace. This has sparked a debate online that's been going on in the Tolkien fandom for quite a while. Are orcs evil? Yes. Are they irredeemable? Well, that's something that's perfectly fine to discuss within the works of the professor, but if you're trying to use it to justify anything in this show while ignoring everything else—
Be silent. Keep your forked tongue behind your teeth.
Conflicted.
Get me the meat.
Go back to the book, go back to the book, go back to the book.
I can feel the legs and the throat.
You know, Isildur wakes up in a spider cape and has to fight Shelob in the first sequence, so...
What am I to call you?
I am your partner, a sharer of gifts.
Previously on the Rims of Power.
The Eastar will surrender to me. Because if he doesn't, I will slaughter the halflings he calls friends.
Sounds good to me.
Are nearly complete, Lord Father. Must we go to war again?
We'll never truly be safe until we've made certain Sauron is no more.
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys!
Since the wearing of this ring, I have perceived glimpses of the unseen world.
Well, to plead with you to make rings for men.
Rings for men.
Okay, everyone, let's get started. Yes, beautiful, feeling it. Let's get some smiles. It's all in here. That's it, yes. Let's let the inside out. Okay, you're an animal. Yes, there we go. You're a tiger. I'm not even shooting you. It's crazy. And I'm spent.
Worry not, my brother.
For I am a master of disguises.
Elrond's task is not to join your company, but to lead it.
Down with the patriarchy. That's the message.
After discovering that the most important messages sent in Middle-earth in over half a millennia haven't made it, warning Grandma Brimbor that Sauron is on his way back to Eregion to forge more rings.
Our letters to Celebrimbor have all gone unanswered. I fear Sauron may be in Eregion. The High King has consented to send me and a small party there to ensure Celebrimbor and his city are safe.
After being talked into it by Guy Ladriel, High District Manager Gil Galad finally decides to do something about it by demoting her and promoting Doogie Elrond.
We fixed the glitch.
Who immediately asks for help.
We shall need an archer, 2 swordsmen. I trust you can recommend a set?
Now you'd think after they pretty much confirm Sauron is returning to Eregion, there would be some sort of sense of urgency, but no, Guy Ladriel still needs to pick a team.
Yes, I can recommend an archer and 2 swordsmen.
Now this is a pretty important mission. You'd think she'd at least pick 100 of the best and brightest. 50 wouldn't be so bad. 25 would be really pushing it.
Nope, just 4.
And after a transitional scene in a show that's already ripped off dialogue and scenes from Peter Jackson's The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, why not rip off a shot? And later on, we find out Guy Ladriel picked 4 of the best archers and swordsmen from your local Starbucks. Props to X-Ray Girl for making the team. And they're off to Eregion until they come up on a bridge that Detective Doogie Elrond thinks is destroyed by lightning.
Lightning.
You are so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
But Lieutenant Guy Ladriel quickly surmises it's Sauron, and then her ringy senses tingling. And not to worry, despite being handed some humiliation and a very temporary demotion, making you think that they might be steering Galadriel back into her graceful Lady of Light form, insufferable girl boss Guy Ladriel makes her triumphant return this episode.
This company will not take counsel from that trinket. If you cannot abide by those terms, you will leave now and return to Lindon.
I should like to, because I do not wish to see any of this company slain, including you.
Ah yes, Galadriel and Elrond bickering for an entire episode. So Tolkienian. It reminds me of that deleted scene from Lord of the Rings.
You're a real hooker, and I'm gonna slap you in public.
You have man boobs.
I'm gonna punch you in the ovary. That's what I'm gonna do. A straight shot.
Ooh, ow.
Right to the baby maker.
And just when you thought this show couldn't sink any lower, it's time for some more creatively bankrupt repurposing within creatively bankrupt repurposing. Despite showrunners J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay saying that they're going to make the Tolkien novel that he never wrote, these creative geniuses are just going to copy and paste events from the books in the Third Age and force them into this fanfic fever dream. But there's a twist. They're going to do what Peter Jackson didn't do. I would argue they've already done that. Peter Jackson made a good Lord of the Rings adaptation, and J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay made the worst adaptation of all time. And these outright thieves get right to work. This brings us to Tom Bombadil and the Barrow-wights, characters and events from the books that were famously left out of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. Let's start with the merry fellow, Tom Bombadil, master of wood, water, and hill, and quite possibly one of the first beings to roam Middle-earth in his summer home in Rhûn. He runs into Dangalf, and just in case Peter Jackson was feeling left out, don't worry, mate. Be prepared for some whiplash because this is repurposing squared. Peter Jackson repurposed events featuring Tom Bombadil from the books for Treebeard and the Two Towers. The Rings of Power repurposed those same events featuring Tom Bombadil from the books and put them in the Second Age.
What's happening? Mary!
He copied my whole flow! Word for word, bar for bar!
And then the Rings of Power repurposed shots from Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, who was repurposing events featuring Tom Bombadil in the books.
You should not be working.
You should not be waking.
Eat earth.
Eat earth.
Dig deep.
Dig deep.
Drink water.
Drink water.
Go to sleep.
He copied my whole flow!
I know, subtle. I don't know why the very litigious Warner Brothers isn't suing someone at this point. And I can hear the Rings of Power stands now. It's totally different from the books. It's not Old Man Willow, it's Old Man Ironwood.
Even your tree out there, Old Man Ironwood.
Great, maybe next episode, Tom Bombadil will introduce us to another tree, Old Man Morningwood. Unfortunately, the character assassination doesn't end there. Old Tom Bombadil from the books is so aloof, the Council of Elrond considered giving him the One Ring, but decided against it because he'd forget about it. The Rings of Power Tom Bombadil, who we will now call Tom Groombadil, is a slightly more predatorial Yoda. And it sounds like old Dangalf wants to learn a little bit more than magic.
Might you teach me how to wield a staff?
Clean your hands, wash your face, then come join me by the fire.
I was never meant to find a staff under these stars.
I was meant to find you, wasn't I?
You're not the first East Star who's eaten honey by my fire.
Years ago, there was another, the Dark Wizard.
And you heard that right. The other E-Star that ate honey by Tom Bombadil's fire went to the dark side. He lost a Padawan, who just so happens to be the Dark Wizard that's totally not supposed to remind us of Saruman. This brings us to the next series of Third Age events repurposed from the books. And yes, I'm fully aware that I'm saying the word repurposed a lot because they're doing it a lot. The Barrow Downs and the Barrow Wights. Now, in Professor Tolkien's masterful work, Tom Bombadil saves Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, who succumbed to the Barrow Wights, and quite frankly, this is something I wish Peter Jackson put in his Lord of the Rings. In the Rings of Power, we have the Elven Baristas, Doogie Elrond, and Warrior Galadriel fighting them because we need a battle scene. But I have to admit that it's an interesting choice that for the second season in a row, they put the Elf of Color in chains.
Don't let go! The black guy always dies first.
After losing an elven red shirt, we find out it was the Barrow Wights that killed the guy who had the most important message in Middle-earth in half a millennia, telling Celebrimbor that Sauron is back.
The king sent a dispatch to warn Celebrimbor. This dispatch.
Now, the show would like you to believe that ending up in the Barrow Downs is all Doogie Elrond's fault for not listening to Guy Ladriel's ringy sense.
We won't reach anywhere at speed if we walk into a trap.
We go south.
Commander, I must protest.
Your opinion on the matter has been heard.
Elrond.
Opinion heard, Lieutenant.
When in truth, it's Guy Ladriel's fault because she didn't tell anybody when she had a chance that Sauron was back. Anyway, Tom Bombadil wasn't hanging around in Rune training wizards in magic and losing a Padawan to the dark side. No one knew what the Astari or wizards were in the Second Age. Gandalf wasn't in the Second Age. How in the hell would Guy Ladriel know who the Barrow Wights are?
What are they? Barrow Wights.
Because they didn't arrive until the Third Age, like Gandalf, but I don't even know why I bother. Speaking of things that don't belong in this show, let's go to female Sam and female Frodo, who we last saw getting sucked up by a dirt devil, and unfortunately they survived. They run into what Amazon contractually cannot call hobbits. These are the Stoors, the ancestors of Frodo, including this guy.
Buckwheat? Yes!
Buckwheat, which interestingly enough would probably work as a hobbit name, takes female Sam and female Frodo to their local village. And when Amazon's given an opportunity to correctly portray the diversity that Tolkien accounted for in his books, no, we get multicultural Stoors, who, like the Harfoots, are a bunch of little assholes who eventually show them that there's a Shire prophecy. But we did get one step closer to figuring out the big mystery over a season and a half. What's Dangalf's name? But first, I have to acknowledge that I missed a hint in the 3-episode premiere.
Really lose control again without a Gand. So we find a Gand, there's plenty of sticks all over the place.
Okay, so not Frodo has just indirectly confirmed that not Gandalf is in fact Gandalf.
Well done on Johnny Law for catching that, and sorry, no, I don't speak fluent stage Irish. As Johnny correctly points out in his video, Gandalf is derived from Norse mythology. The word Gand or Gandir means essentially magic staff mixed with elf, Gandalf. But if that wasn't on the nose for you enough, well, there's this.
This friend of yours
Who is he anyways?
He's a giant.
Oh, like an elf?
Bigger than that.
Oh, so he's a great big grand elf.
Know what I mean? Nudge, nudge.
Maybe by the end of the season, we'll find out Dan Galf's name, and then the next mystery will be who's the Dark Wizard. Yes, there is another storyline in this slog that's barely worth mentioning. Girl Sildur and Don Lemonless, who are in search of Theo. You remember Theo, the son of Bronwyn, the Middle-earth dispensary owner who died. He and the other wild men were captured by the Ents and put in tree cages. And despite the giant gaping holes, nobody bothers to escape. Now some other stuff happened, but it's not worth talking about because in truth, this scene only exists to do this. Remember the Fellowship of the Rings?
What was that?
There are nameless things in the deep places of this world.
There are older and fouler things than orcs in the deep places of the world.
There is another reason these scenes exist, so we can get more shipping, hooking up Estrid, the completely made-up character by Amazon, and Isildur. How do I know this? Well, it comes directly from the ex-Twitter account of Amazon's The Rings of Power.
I acrimoniously loathe shipping in all its manifestations, and always have done so since I grew old and wary enough to detect its presence.
Anywho, they eventually catch up to the Ents and free Theo. Now prepare yourselves, I'm about to give the Rings of Power a compliment. The Ents look pretty good, especially in the scene where the Ent husband gets cucked by Don Lemonless.
Tell me, Shotzi, is it true what they say about the way you people are gifted?
Now back to the Elven Away team with Doogie Elrond and Guy Ladriel, who can apparently force heal elves now.
That's not how the ring works.
And it was noble of Guy Ladriel to give up the ring to Doogie Elrond and send the elves away so she could have a solo female empowerment moment. And we also got an inversion of this scene.
I am not alone.
I stand alone.
But this is the moment you've all been waiting for. Galadriel, as she's described in the books. Tall, grave, and beautiful, she was clad wholly in white, with hair of deep gold, and no sign of age was upon her, unless it were the depths of her eyes, for these were keen as lancers in the starlight, and yet profound with the wells of deep memory. Came to kick some ass! I really like how she discovered napalm powers by shooting 2 arrows through a campfire and a couple of lanterns. Think about all the orc fathers who aren't coming home tonight. Unfortunately, our girl boss warrior Guy Ladriel gets caught by Adar, but lives to repurpose more Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings in future episodes.
I was there, Gandalf.
I led Isildur into the heart of Mount Doom.
Wait. Cast it into the fire! Destroy it!
Should have ended that day, and evil was allowed to endure.
Previously on the Rings of Power.
Fire mountain oak. The ground shakes. It spread through the bones of the earth, collapsing our sun shafts. Our ability to grow crops.
No, I'm gonna starve!
These rings will be beyond any power yet devised by dwarf or man. They shall be rings of power.
Queen of Lies, unfit for rule!
His dying words, the king spoke to me and said it was from this she took counsel. This elf stone is your queen!
A legion of orcs had marched into elvish lands.
That trail, I gather it leads to Eregion. Your High King believes the dwarves to be unworthy. In fact, he has forbidden the forging of any more rings at all.
We have not the time to bandy words about convincing him who is worthy of aid.
Whoa, gay!
Now, some have said episode 5 is the best of the worst. Now, if by best you mean boring, sure. Since this episode is such a slog, we'll do what the Rings of Power does to the lore and just hit the bullet points. But unlike this show, we'll do it in order. And why not with your opening shot, rip off the opening shot of the 2 towers? We start out in Moria, where the dwarvish health and safety inspector said it wasn't safe to dig after the sun shafts collapsed. I mean, never mind the giant windows Moria has, but that's not important right now. And never mind the dwarves who mined out an entire mountain are all of a sudden afraid to dig. And although the dwarven rings were made for wealth and power, essentially, amplifying their natural skills, and eventually led to them being greedy and wrath, just like with Galadriel, they also come with a ringy sense. Durin III is able to find out where to dig, and the famine that started 2 days ago, 3 weeks ago, 3 months ago, I have no idea, is taken care of.
Barely an inconvenience.
Then the dwarves jump on the Middle-earth high-speed train and head on over to Region. Remember the Fellowship of the Ring?
Oh, I remember.
Remember the doors to Moria?
The doors of Durin, Lord of Moria. Speak, friend, and enter.
At this point, dear viewer, because you didn't watch the show, you're probably wondering, did they show us the creation of the Western Doors of Moria? Nope, they didn't even do that. They just showed it.
The doors of Durin. Unbreachable, visible only by moonlight, and guarded by a password known only to friends.
Now, what the hell were the doors of Durin doing in a Region in Sauron's presence? I have no idea. It's a good thing he didn't use the knowledge to find him and understand that password hint.
It works, sir. We have the combination. Great. What's the combination? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes. That's amazing. I've got the same combination on my luggage.
Then Grandma Brimbor and Thirst Trapitar go and argue like an old married gay couple about putting some men's fingers in some rings.
Rings for men.
I did not say anything about rings.
It is a game you play.
Have you had a change of heart?
Come, we shall speak of men tomorrow.
I would prefer to speak of them now.
Cat teeth.
This is followed by quite possibly the worst travesty in this episode when discussing how easily corruptible men are. Hair Club for Minotaur, the Lord of Wigs, invokes names from the books.
There are always some who rise forth and shine. Eärendil, Tur, Beren.
Now, Sauron right there is trying to justify giving rings to men by using the name Eärendil, who is a half-elf. But to be fair to Amazon, they only had $1 billion and probably couldn't afford the research. But as far as Beren of Beren and Luthien is concerned...
Oh! Oh, wow! Will Smith just smacked the shit out of me.
Keep Baron's name out your mouth!
I'm going to, okay?
But then there's this unintentional but quite accurate meta statement from the show.
Let us not tempt failure by allowing our reach to exceed our grasp.
This brings us to the mighty men of Westerness, the Númenóreans. If adapted properly, this could take up its own show of 25 episodes per season for the next decade. In the Rings of Power, they've been reduced to a C plot that plays out like a telenovela. Don't believe me?
El Númenóreano y el Encanto.
De que tus padres no están en Europa, sino en la miserable vecindad de Quinto Patio en la que vives. ¿Vas a negarme que vives en una vecindad?
Sí, es cierto.
You'll have to forgive me because I'm still trying to get this scene right in my head, but essentially Miriel tells Elendil to keep his head down because he had a vision in the Palantir of him riding a horse, and it wasn't the vision that she was getting from the Palantir of Numenor's destruction, although she didn't tell him she had that vision. If that doesn't make any sense to you, it shouldn't, because it doesn't. And before anybody tells me what Elendil's vision meant according to the lore, stop. We're talking about the Rings of Power here. And it's time we check back with this character.
Look familiar?
Actually, no. Oh yeah, the daughter of Elendil, an Amazon creation that was never in the lore, who betrays him for Ar-Pharazôn, who only exists to force meaningless conflict and give us scenes with some unintentionally meta lines that tell us exactly how Amazon feels about Tolkien.
You mock that which is sacred.
I mock that which is absurd.
And since we're overdue, it's time for some repurposed dialogue.
Until we meet again in the far green country under a swift sunrise.
A far green country under a swift sunrise.
Anyway, let's get this over with. Ar-Pharazôn tells his Amazon original character son that his mom said he wouldn't amount to anything, forcing him to be a guy whose name I can't bother to remember, going off to kill a guy whose name I can't bother to remember. I'm supposed to care so much about this character who is dying. I just remembered his name when the closed captions reminded me of it. Oh no, don't die! No! I will avenge you! Checks notes. Valandil! Meanwhile, back in Moria, we get another unintentional meta line that describes how everyone involved in this show really feels.
A gift from Owley, one that's honed and refined over a lifetime. And this, it feels somehow like cheating.
Now, if I told you the following scene was Disa dropping a crystal ball down a hallway about 10 feet from a major market that no dwarves have discovered in thousands of years, and then singing and waking up a Balrog, would you believe me? Well, that's exactly what happens. Disa drops a ball down a hallway about 10 feet from a major market, and then sings and wakes up a Balrog. But not to worry, the Balrog is a slow riser. It's gonna take him a little under 4,000 years to finally get out of bed, which means about 2 or 3 weeks with this show. Then we get to see Durin III pass out the 7 dwarven rings, which canonically he shouldn't even have. The dwarves and the men don't get their rings until after the elves turn on Sauron, and I don't even know why I bother. Meanwhile, back in Eregion, the Amazon original character Meridian, Mauritania, Modernity, Maternity, not really sure and don't care, makes her own ring and turns invisible, which apparently is something that's lifted from Lord of the Rings Online.
Ages ago, in the vastness of Eregion, the Dark Lord came in fair guise. In those days, he beguiled Narmalith, daughter of Laodon, and broke her mind.
How strange. When the light caught your hair, for a moment you seemed her perfect likeness.
Whose likeness?
My Lady Galadriel's, of course.
Definition of a red flag, isn't it?
Shout out to High King Feanor Alpha Chat on X Twitter for pointing this out. These series of events almost caused Grandma Brimbor to give up his secret to Sauron about putting some men's fingers in some rings. And now the daddies are arguing again, which leads to a staff meeting with the mostly female elven smiths of Eregion. And this is all over the corruption of the dwarven rings. And instead of recalling them, the multicultural elven smiths of Eregion decide to fight the evil rings by making more evil rings. This, of course, will be followed by a disinformation campaign. And anyone who calls this out will be called anti-smithing and against the smithing, because the smithing is settled. Meanwhile, back in Linden, High District Manager Gil-galad finally hears from Grandma Brimbor. And although it's been quite some time, how much time exactly, I have no idea with this show, and they've lost multiple messengers, and they sent out Guy Ladriel, Doogie, Elrond, and 4 of the best and brightest from your local Starbucks. And despite the message being completely suspicious, saying everything's fine and I'll do exactly what you say, and Elrond showing up after a good sprint from Eregion, saying it's been compromised, High District Manager Gil-galad says, nah, it'll be fine. We're going to attack Mordor instead. And it wouldn't be an episode of Rings of Power without Warrior Galadriel. As you probably didn't know because you didn't watch last episode, she was captured by Adar. And despite all of her rage, she's still just a rat in a cage. And you may notice the orcs are fearful of Warrior Galadriel, as they should be. They're all just torturing hard to bring maggoty bread home to their families. But because this is Warrior Galadriel, she isn't captured long. She pulls a prison shank out of her prison wallet. And this episode saved the most absurd and the worst for last. The Amazon original character Adar offers an alliance to Galadriel with the orcs, which is as ridiculous as shipping Sauron and Galadriel. Previously on the Rings of Power.
The Hotfoots, where are they?
Well, there's what you're searching for, and there's what you find, though, isn't it?
Might you teach me how to wield a staff?
Clean your hands, wash your face, and come join me by the fire.
Not every battle must be fought to be won.
Give me your hand.
I don't care.
How much do you really know about this, Arnatar?
The orcs are not in Mordor. A legion of them are headed for Eregion. Galadriel was right.
But I've been watching you all evening, and I want to tear you apart.
And this episode opens up with the man, Don Lemonless, who commits a hate crime against 3 innocent orc fathers. These poor Uruk folks were raping, pillaging, and torturing hard to provide for their families, and they were taken out by this monster, who clearly hasn't been to the Sylvan barbershop for a while. And this unwarranted slaying of innocent, corrupted forms of life was all over a map, and then he fucks off not to be seen for the rest of the episode. But to be fair to Don Lemonless, Amazon is marginalizing his character this season. And then we're back to Eregion, where the multicultural Gen Z, mostly female Smiths of Eregion call a staff meeting and call Grandma Brimbor to task for creating a hostile work environment. I guess creating the Rings of Power out of order and being the dumbest character in this show is taking its toll. And acting as a surrogate for the audience, Grandma Brimbor forgets his Amazon original character assistant's name.
What is your name again, Smith?
Do you mean you don't remember?
Motherfucker, what makes you think I care?
Then Sauron shows up and tells Modernity and the rest of the multicultural Gen Z Elven Smiths of Eregion they're getting pink slips. And he does this to allow his husband, Grandma Brimbor, to complete the 9 rings for men to put their fingers in. And apparently it wasn't only messages that weren't making it to Eregion from Linden, it was messages from Eregion. And when one of those messengers finally turns up with a message carved on him that translates to "Where is he?" do they do anything about it? They go, nah, it'll be fine. And the scene ends with Sauron walking the battlements of Eregion and noticing orc campfires. But apparently all the lookouts and scouts missed. And as just a basic story, the only way any of this can work is everyone is retarded. Speaking of that, let's get to Galadriel and Adar, where she thinks as her prisoner, they're about to discuss an alliance. That's right, an alliance between Galadriel and orcs. Now, I could break down canonically why this portrays every facet of her character, but this is the show that wants her to jump Sauron's Barad-dûr, hashtag Galadriel. Now, in this instance of women taking charge, Galadriel not only confirms that Halbrand is Sauron to Adar, she tells him about the elven ring Nenya and follows that up by telling Adar she gave it to Elrond. Stupid! Now, canonically, none of this happened, but if you set out to make the worst adaptation of all time, this would be it. My favorite part is when Adar is telling Galadriel the story of how he and a half a dozen orcs Caesared Sauron, and he brings out his crown, which apparently used to belong to Morgoth. Now, they mentioned they downsized it, but there's a little problem here. Morgoth used to be between 25 and 30 feet tall, and in the real story, when Morgoth fell at the end of the First Age, the Valar made his crown into a collar. Meanwhile, over at the Númenórean and the Restless, or As Middle-earth Turns, or This is the Second Age of Our Lives, shout out to Nerd Cookies for that one. After Elendil is betrayed by his Amazon original creation daughter, whose name I can't be bothered to remember.
What is your name again, Smith?
He refuses to bend the knee to Ar-Pharazôn and is sentenced to trial by abyss. And after crying with his daughter, he cries with Miriel, and then they touch foreheads. And even after Miriel tells him to bend the knee, Elendil says no, because he's gonna leave his fate to the gods, and then he says something I've been waiting for all season.
The sea is always right.
The sea is always right!
The sea is always right! And the sea is always right.
What the fuck are you talking about, man?
And within a show that's completely jacked up the story of Númenor, partially by taking the race swap Muriel and making her far more prominent than she ever was so she wouldn't be robbed of her agency. Because canonically, against her will and against all laws of Númenor, Ar-Pharazôn forced his first cousin, Miriel, and yes, they're cousins, into marriage, and that's how he usurped the throne. Anyway, in a story where they didn't want to rob Miriel of her agency, she literally robs Elendil of his by taking his place at the trial of the Abyss, and after the black woman is spit out by the white worm, all of a sudden the window-licking Númenóreans like her again. So let me get this straight. Within this show, to gain power in Númenor, you either have to have an eagle land next to you or be spit out by a white worm. Did I get that right? So Tolkienian. This brings us to the Harfoots and the Stools. I'm sorry, the Stoors. Another group of characters that has been thankfully marginalized this season by Amazon. And after setting all that up, this scene is too boring and inconsequential to talk about, except for the fact that Buckwheat made out with female Sam. Now, in the past, I've made some pretty harsh accusations about what Hollywood does to some of our sacred stories, some of our lore, some of our American mythology. For example, I accuse the Acolyte of taking George Lucas's lore to Harvey Weinstein's office. Well, The Rings of Power takes Tolkien's to Epstein Island, concerning Dangalf and now Maya Master Tom Bombadil instead of the Tom Bombadil from the books, who's a merry fellow, a guardian of the forest with a smoking hot wife. Now he's Dangalf's sensei, who's going to teach him how to wield the secret fire.
The secret fire whispers to us. If we have ears to hear, it tells us things. Even shows us things.
Does it show us things that will be, or things that only might be?
It shows tomorrow's clouds as clear as yesterday's sunshine.
That's not how the secret fire works.
The secret fire, or the flame of Arnor, is not the Force. It's essentially the power of light. It could possibly be interpreted as the Holy Spirit, which absolutely confirms that Dangalf is Gandalf. And let's just keep in mind, we're 6 episodes in to season 2, and they're still mystery boxing Gandalf's name.
Those big folk were only after us to get to him, the stranger.
And everything that's happened to Dangalf this season has led to him having to pick his staff.
The Dark Wizard found his staff, and now the time has come for you to find yours. You'll find your true staff only when the vision of your heart is single to the service of the secret fire.
And I see what they're doing here. By the time Dangalf gets a name, a staff, and his pointy hat, it'll be the Third Age.
But wait! There's more!
It's time to repurpose a line from the books and Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings.
Somehow I know, unless I find her soon, she will die. Both of them will die.
Many that die deserve life. Some that live deserve death. Who are you to give it to them?
Now, some people might think in isolation, which it isn't, that repurposing this line from the books and the movie is harmless. I strongly disagree, not only because it's abject hackery, because of the context. Because as most of you know from the books and the film, that's Gandalf's response to Frodo wishing Bilbo had killed Gollum, essentially wishing death on something that might seem irredeemable but might not be.
It's a pity Bilbo didn't kill him when he had the chance.
Pity? It was pity that stayed Bilbo's, huh? Many that live deserve death. Some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them, Frodo?
In the Rings of Power, it was Tom Bombadil responding to Dangalf wanting his friends to live, which makes old Tom Groombadil a dick, and the writers complete morons. Meanwhile, over at Khazad-dûm, Sauron took the Middle-earth high-speed train to re-up on some of that mithril. And he says the word.
Or perhaps Khazad-dûm would prefer something more precious.
Now Durin III says no because he thinks he can get a better deal out of Sauron. And after Sauron says fine, he looks at a torch and sees a Balrog to remind the audience that it's under Moria. Never mind the fact that if Sauron knew Durin's Bane was down there, the first thing he would have done is tried to recruit him. Canonically, he doesn't wake up for thousands of years, but in this show, it'll probably mean next season. Anyway, after Durin IV notices that his ring is affecting Durin III like the One Ring, which it shouldn't, he asks him to take it off and we get another repurposed line.
Take off the ring. I will not. It is mine. Belongs to me.
It's mine.
And apparently now the Dwarven rings give them superpowers.
That's not how the rings work.
But we did get some interesting information this episode. We find out that the first black female dwarf, Disa, who wasn't really the first black female dwarf, was abandoned by her father.
I love him as much as you do. I only knows he's twice the father to me my own ever was.
Now, Disa Nuts and Durin IV have decided that the dwarves are delving too greedily and too deep. And because women are taking charge this episode, it's Disa Nuts who's gonna stop them. How, you ask? Like this.
He's gonna blow!
And I have to admit, this is a little on the nose for Amazon, even as I record this on Batman Day, because she becomes Bat Disa, the Dark Dwarf, and Tolkien's mighty dwarves, who were created by Aule to be strong, resistant to fire, and the evils of Morgoth, who were hardier than any other race, run like bitches from bats. Speaking of women taking charge, back to Guy Ladriel, who was just tricked by Adar into believing there was going to be some sort of alliance with orcs, and then she gave up all the information he needed. Now the room temperature IQ Guy Ladriel is warning Adar that he's falling into a trap and giving Sauron everything he needs, which she would know.
This is all his design. This is what Sauron wants.
For she is more fair than all the jewels beneath the earth.
Now, I totally agree with Elle Magazine that this is an episode with a theme of men needing to listen to women, but why in the hell should they in this case? Because Guy Ladriel is the woman solely responsible for all of this. And in the final scene, Sauron is able to conjure a spell to convince Grandma Brimbor to hurry up and finish those 9 rings for men to put their fingers in. Sauron makes it look like it's a nice peaceful day in Eregion, when in truth, it's actually night and elves are running for their lives. Now, I'm guessing this power would have come in handy in over a dozen different scenes throughout these 1.5 seasons, including when he got Caesared by a half a dozen orcs. But that's not important right now. He gives Grandma Brimbor some mithril and he's off to work. And it looks like Grandma Brimbor will be making the 9 rings for men to put their fingers in during the sack of Eregion. But shout out to the elven lookouts of Eregion for finally showing up to work and noticing the giant legions of orcs with trebuchets shooting fireballs at their city.
That escalated quickly.
Far be it from me to point out that it was Sauron who led the host out of Mordor and invaded Eriador. And this took a long time because the elves held their own for a little while, including an alliance between Elrond and this guy named Celeborn, whose name shows up in the appendices, but of course Galadriel's gonna take his place, so she'll have her agency. And the sack of Eregion preceded Sauron getting the Rings of Power. And the Rings of Power didn't affect the bearer until Sauron made the One Ring. And at this point, I feel bad for Sauron. He put in all this work over 500 years, and all he had to do was tell a couple of elves they look pretty or one that he has a nice gown. He told one chick he was a king and she just believed him. He's probably kicking himself. And yes, I'm Team Sauron now. Not that I like the character, I just couldn't care less if anyone else lives or dies.
Shut up! Shut the f***! You're all right to take. Shut up! Will you shut up? Shut up! Shut up!
Previously on the Rings of Power.
The greatest of elven smiths is consumed by his work. He asks that I handle all matters of administration in his stead.
I'm just fatigued. You are the Lord of Eregion. You have responsibilities. Until the 9 are complete, nothing else matters.
Without Mithril, the remaining Rings of Power may never be complete.
We need more. Or perhaps Khazad-dûm would prefer something more precious.
Have you gone mad? Take off the ring. I have nothing to prove to you, boy.
This is all his design! This is what Sauron wants!
For she is more fair than all the jewels beneath the earth.
You are so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
I don't want to bury the lead here. How does this particular episode sink to a new low? Well, one of the shining examples is Elrond makes out with his future mother-in-law, Galadriel. Oh! And Tolkien's grave just blew up again. And we'll get to the details of that, believe me. But once again, we start in Eregion, where we're still waiting for Grandma Brimbor to figure out that Anatar is Sauron. I mean, they've been so subtle about it, and yes, he's still trying to make those rings for men to put their fingers in. Sauron is now convinced all the multicultural Gen Z room temperature IQ elves of Eregion that he's in charge now. And this provides an opportunity for more repurposed dialogue.
Celebrimbor's mind is gone. We are alone.
Not alone.
You have proven your quality.
You've shown your quality, sir. The very highest.
And yes, the forging of the 9 rings for men to put their fingers in, and all these conversations are going down while Eregion is being attacked, including Modernity hanging out in the battlements while it's being firebombed. On top of that, Modernity and the rest of the elven window lickers of Eregion sit around and witness the orcs very quickly and precisely turn their trebuchets around so they can fire rocks at a cliff that dams up the river. Yet somehow they're having trouble knocking down this wall. But while all this is going down, it allows enough time for Don Lemonless to show up and do absolutely nothing for half the episode, other than report that this is a mostly peaceful sack of Eregion. Meanwhile, back in Moria, Durin III standing behind Bat Disa, who always needs to put her leg out for some reason, who somehow held off all the dwarven miners from Khazad-dûm when they ran like bitches from bats last episode, does it again. Now, to be fair, apparently there's only a dozen dwarven miners in all of Khazad-dûm, and there is a real danger of bats flying out of Disa's open legs. After throwing down his hammer, Narvi informs Durin that his man has returned after his walk of shame, and who could forget their last meeting from season 1?
Give me the meat and give it to me raw.
Elrond?
My heart sings to see you, old friend.
You tidal-haired, flowery-tongued flagpole. Have you any idea what I've gone through since you left?
I need your axe, old friend.
Homosexual.
You know what my favorite thing about reviewing garbage television is? Sitting and watching the most idiotic character finally catch on to what the audience has known since the first episode of season 1. Halbrand and Anatar are Sauron, which technically makes him a they-them, which answers another question I had from season 1. What are Sauron's pronouns? And you know how Grandma Brimbor finally figures out he's in an illusion? Remember the Matrix?
Oh, I remember.
Except this time it's totally different because it's with a mouse. And once Grandma Brimbor figures this all out, Sauron, who still needs him, lets him go and almost gets him killed. Then he gets up and leisurely walks around Eregion while it's being attacked and throws modernity off the battlements. Granted, he was under Sauron's power, but I still shouldn't have found this scene to be as funny as it was. This is the point where Elrond finally shows up to the Battle of Eregion. Now, how in the hell did he get here so fast from Khazad-dûm? I have no idea. And what the hell is up with those bell-end helmets? But not to worry, ladies and gentlemen, Elrond has brought a secret weapon. My producer, X-Ray Girl. They are also joined by High District Manager Gil Gadaddy.
A lovely individual called me Gil Gadaddy in a coffee shop, which I took as a huge... It made me emotional. Gil Gadaddy.
Who Elrond clearly acknowledges there, and I want you to remember that. And I can hear you now, dear viewer. Why isn't Gil Galad, formidable and wise, warrior king, not leading the charge yet is still part of the battle? That will be a good question. My guess is he was added in later during reshoots and there's some more evidence of this to come, but it's hard to tell because this is some of the worst editing and directing I've seen since, well, The Acolyte. But the bell-end-headed warriors of Lindon are stopped in their tracks when it's revealed that the orcs have Galadriel as a prisoner. And despite all her rage, she's still just a rat back in her cage. And at this point, why not have another elven-orc parlay? Because orcs are well known for sitting around unarmed elves and not killing them. I keep forgetting that these are kinder and gentler orcs. And because people can't stop hitting on Elrond this episode, it's Adar's turn.
You have the beauty of your foremother, Melian of the Valar.
Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me.
But there is a line from Adar that I like.
If she speaks again, cut out her tongue.
The Amazon original character Adar wants the ring Nenya, which canonically no one's supposed to know about, in exchange for killing Sauron. How does Adar know about the ring Nenya and the fact that Sauron is in Eregion? Well, girl boss Galadriel took charge and told him everything. Doogie Elrond turns down Adar's offer, and the first stupid thing to happen is the orcs didn't kill the elves right away. The second stupid thing to happen is Doogie Elrond is allowed to say goodbye to Galadriel because he's unarmed, although this guy is clearly armed. The third stupid thing to happen is Elrond asks for Galadriel's forgiveness because he's leaving her to die. There's absolutely nothing to forgive because everything is Galadriel's fault. Oh, honorable mention of stupidity. Where in the hell is High King Gil Galad during this parlay? This is followed by what could be best described as nothing short of a creative atrocity. The worst crime against imagination. The worst atrocity against the beloved professor's work in this cesspool of a show. Jeff Bezos got his Game of Thrones, and he got it, minus all the cultural impact, the notoriety, and viewers. But it did cost more. Am I surprised that the show that took one of the best female characters from Tolkien and turned her into a man-spreading moron, or took the embodiment of evil and turned him into a thirst trap would do something like this? Actually, yes. Put simply, this is an indefensible, perverted, and subversive act against everything the professor believed and wrote. And not that this show ever had a prayer, there's no coming back from this one, and I'm really looking forward to the scholars and Tolkien professors who are going to run out there and try to defend this. I look forward to all their honest reviews in about a year. I mean, canonically, this would make for some awkward dinners in Lorien and Rivendell, but to be fair, this actually does bring to mind a couple of alternate deleted scenes from Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings.
I want you to know that tonight I am going to pleasure myself to the image of you doing that to Darren. I want to roll you into a little ball and shove you up my vagina. You could just live there.
Arwen. Tomenilu. Ichaer Gwannar Navalano Sibado no Kirar.
Anyway, after the kinder and gentler orcs decided to let Doogie Elrond leave after their parley, Doogie Elrond goes on to kill some orcs, including putting one in a trebuchet and then firing it on his own city, Eregion. This is followed by the only character I actually care about in this show dying, Doogie Elrond's horse. All within a show known for actually killing them. And this is where things get really stupid. I mean, the battle scenes are just embarrassing. Everything's a mess. You have no idea how many orcs or elves there are. You don't know where anybody is. I don't know what the hell this guy got hit by. And then we get this line from an orc.
Nam Kibakai, Kinam Shubak.
And if you guys were worried about Galadriel, of course she was able to escape in her very clever disguise of a robe with her blonde hair hanging out walking through an orc camp. And while your guess will be the same as mine, she is obviously going to save herself. No, she's saved by Deus Ex Don Lemonless, who's been hanging around for a couple of days not doing much of anything other than waiting to save Galadriel. And the rest of the episode turns into a fever dream. We finally get to see the troll based on Mike Ehrmantraut from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, and then he dies by the hands of Doogie Elrond, Don Lemonless, and High King Gil-galad, who Elrond is surprised to see.
Commander! High King! You should not be here! The King's place is wherever the need is greatest.
Which he shouldn't be, because he clearly acknowledged him right before his charge on Adar's forces. And if the feared warrior High King Gil-galad wasn't supposed to be at this battle, what the hell was he doing at the last one? And there was a lot of gaffes this episode, so much I didn't catch them all, but that's why we have the internet, including but not limited to Adar stating Elrond's foremother Melian is of the Valar.
You have the beauty of your foremother, Melian of the Valar.
When a simple Google search will tell you she's Maya. They also had a little trouble spelling Middle Earth and remembering what Eregion looked like. To be fair, keeping track of continuity is expensive, and Amazon only had a budget of $1 billion. And this episode marks the passing of our beloved diverse elf Rianne Johnson, played by X-Ray Girl. It's like we hardly knew her. But she goes out like Boromir after getting a shot off like Bronn from Game of Thrones. Now back in Eregion, Sauron finds time to share a little bit about his past to Celebrimbor, making it sound like he got diddled by Morgoth or Melkor, or according to the Geek website Screen Rant, Melkoth.
You must know it pains me, treating you like
you've treated countless others?
Like Morgoth treated me. Sometimes, the pain almost became a reward. Became a game.
Ugh. Anyway, after Sauron finishes sharing his past trauma, he leaves, and Celebrimbor, instead of using this tool to maybe, I don't know, cut his chains, decides to cut off his thumb to escape, who's saved by Galadriel, who just magically shows up, and now all the elves of Eregion like Grandma Brimbor again because Galadriel told them to. Anyway, both of them apologize to each other for completely screwing up Simple Earth when Amazon should be apologizing to anyone who watched this. Then Celebrimbor, who canonically should be in Eregion, gives Galadriel, who canonically should not be in Eregion, the 9 rings for men, which canonically Galadriel never touched, to keep them from Sauron, who canonically shouldn't be in Eregion. And when Grandma Brimbor brings some elves to go and confront Sauron, he uses his power to get the elves to kill themselves, and man, that would have come in handy when he was getting Caesar by half a dozen orcs. Now, when Doogie Elrond took the high-speed Middle-earth rail to Khazad-dûm to go meet his boyfriend Durin III, he was asking for an army, and they were supposed to come at first light, just like the Two Towers, and in an inverted scene from the Two Towers.
The dwarves! The dwarves are coming! Look to the north!
They don't show up because apparently now Durin III is killing his own people.
Your father turned his axe on my men, cut through them like stalks of wheat.
And it looks like the dwarves of Moria are completely aware of the Balrog.
He's gonna dig, gonna loose that beast. Rid us of your stupidity.
And now all seems lost for the 9 elves left in Eregion. After that, Adar guts Don Lemonless, and we've lost 2 elves of color this episode, Amazon, you bigots. And then Adar, who I have to admit, even though it's an Amazon original creation, the character's starting to grow on me, gets the ring Nenya that canonically Elrond is never supposed to have. And although I would love to play this, but I can't because of the copyright gods, and believe me, you'll be thanking me if you ever heard it, they roll the credits with Cookie Monster metal.
First thing to specify is that there's no such thing really as canon in Tolkien.
The canons of narrative in any medium cannot be wholly different, and the failure of poor films is often precisely an exaggeration, and in the intrusion of unwarranted matter owing to not perceiving where the core of the original lies.
I have no right to ask this of any of you, but will you follow me? One last time.
Previously on the Rims of Power.
Let the half-hoods be your sole concern. I will see to the Eastar myself.
The Dark Wizard found his staff, and now the time has come for you to find yours.
There's something under the mines.
That's a huge fish!
Innocent!
Once the deceiver obtains a being's trust, he gains the ability to sculpt their very thoughts.
The High King believes I may be vulnerable to deception.
No shit.
This is all his design! This is what Sauron wants! You forgot your bling bling.
I may have forgotten to mention that the finale is incredibly dumb and it doesn't waste any time. Let's get straight to the stupid. We open up in Khazad-dûm with Durin versus Durin. Durin demands Durin take off the ring, then Durin cries. Then Durin digs too greedily and too deep by himself. After that, Durin calls over Durin to check out the cavern full of mithril he just found and something else. Remember the Balrog from Lord of the Rings? And even though canonically, and I'm looking at you, Tolkien professor, the Balrog shouldn't show up for thousands of years, he's here. Oh, I'm sorry, this is the Rings of Power I'm talking about. She's here. This is the point where the Rings of Power exemplifies why canonically there's only one Durin at a time.
Durin! Durin!
I mean, is Durin asking for help from Durin, or is Durin just yelling at Durin? I don't know. Anyway, Durin looks on as Durin decides to self-delete by attacking the Balrog that Amazon obviously licensed from Warner Brothers. I can hear you now, dear viewer. Why did Durin do this? It's completely pointless. It's not like it's going to buy anybody any time, and you'd be right. So now I have a couple of questions for you, dear viewer. What do you think happens next? The Balrog license from Warner Brothers destroys Khazad-dûm and kills every dwarf in it, or the Rings of Power rolls its opening credits and we never see the Balrog again. If you guessed the latter, you unfortunately have watched the Rings of Power. But we did get an explanation from showrunners J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay why the Balrog just goes back to sleep and doesn't bother anybody in Khazad-dûm for thousands of years. Because the fall of Khazad-dûm and the Balrog are an allegory, and we know how much the professor liked those, of climate change. When asked by The Hollywood Reporter why the Balrog just didn't destroy Khazad-dûm right there and then, McKay responds, "This is the thing where, how do societies fall? Usually it's gradual, and then all at once. If you want to use climate change as a metaphor, climate change is not an event. Climate change is a process that ebbs and flows."
You gotta be f***ing kidding.
There are a few storylines that the showrunners decided to mop up in the finale, and I'm going to go over them with the same care they did. But I want to give the showrunners credit. If they are going to truncate the entire Second Age into a shorter timeline and include the events of Numenor, which canonically Tolkien, Professor, take place well over 1,000 years after the events of Region, it takes a certain commitment to incompetence to take Isildur, the man who cut the ring from Sauron's hand, and turn him into a supporting character, with less screen time than the Amazon original characters female Sam, female Frodo, or modernity. And all he does is bond with Theo after he's abandoned by his surrogate father Don Lemonless, saw that one coming, makes out with the married Tolkien in Tolkien, and then fucks off to Numenor after finding out his father's a traitor and Ar-Pharazôn is the king. Speaking of Numenor, after Ar-Pharazôn is chosen as king because an eagle landed next to him, his throne is now threatened because Miriel gets spit out by a white sea worm, and yes, this is the same Miriel that's described in Tolkien's Legendarium as being fairer than ivory, pearls, or silver. And although the elves had a hard time getting a message in and out of Lindon or Region, one made it to Westerness.
We have learned why Miriel was able to bewitch the sea.
And Ar-Pharazôn has branded Miriel and her faithful as traitors for being in league with Sauron. And after fucking up the lore beyond all recognition so they can give Miriel some agency, all in effort to remove the mighty Elendil's agency. First, he's saved by his daughter, an Amazon original character with a nice rack who, for the life of me, I can't remember her name. And all this is done so Miriel can send the mighty Elendil on his path. She even gives him Narsil of the Shards of Narsil, you know, the blade that cut the ring from Sauron's hand, in another repurposed scene.
It is called Narsil.
The White Flame.
Reclaim your lordship, and with this sword, your destiny.
Anduri, the flame of the west, forged from the shards of Narsil. Sauron will not have forgotten the sword of Elendil.
Elendil rides off into exile and Miriel gets arrested, and thus ends this installment of The Númenórean and the Restless. You know, we haven't heard from the Dark Wizard, female Sam, female Frodo, or Gandalf in a while, so let's get this one over with. There is some good news though. We finally get the big payoff that they've been setting up for over 2 seasons that absolutely everyone saw coming. All while setting up another obvious mystery that will have 5s and 10s of people talking about it until season 3 comes out in 2026. Gandalf finally reunites with the Harfoots and the the Stores, and confronts the Dark Wizard, who confirms he's one of the 5 wizards who are not supposed to show up until 1,000 years into the Third Age.
We are as kin. 5 of us there were.
Not to get too far in the weeds, but he could be one of the blue wizards, but I think it's far more likely that he's going to be another. After the Dark Wizard kills one of the bad guys from Furiosa, he claims not to be a Dark Wizard and asks Gandalf to join him, but when he refuses, the Dark Wizard decides to show how bad things will be under Sauron by killing all the Harfoots and the Stools. The Stores. I'm starting to like this guy. Gandalf pulls a Ray Palpatine and saves all the Harfoots and the Stools. Stores. Except for this one, the Dark Wizard fucks off and says, we'll meet again someday, and I half expected someone to say, what a sour man. It's way too soon though. That scene will probably happen in season 3 or 4. But if you think that sounds stupid, just wait, because we do get Gandalf's name in the most cringe way possible.
Don't be a stranger now.
No, God!
Thank you kindly, Grandalf.
No, God, please, no! No!
Goodbye, Grandalf.
No!
Gandalf.
No!
And I'm still gonna call him Gandalf. So he finds his stick, he gets his name, he goes back to Jedi Master Bombadil, and it's time for some more repurposed dialogue from Harry Potter.
A wizard does not find his staff. It finds him.
The wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter.
But we did get a line from female Sam that unintentionally describes the state of this show perfectly.
Some things can't be fixed. Some things lost are lost forever. Because this world's so much bigger than any of us. We've just got to accept it. What's broke is broke and won't fix.
And there's some potential good news or bad news. They separate Gandalf from female Sam and female Frodo, so they could be writing the Harfoots and the Stools out of the story, or giving them their own. Considering what they did this season, which was absolutely nothing, I'm leaning towards being written out of the story. Either way,
I don't care.
So let's check in on one of the multiple ships from this show, Sauron Brimbor. And just in case you think I'm being a bit hyperbolic, the Rings of Power creators on that big season 2 finale reveal, and Sauron Sauron's mistake, from the stranger's identity reveal to Galadriel's fight, and whether Sauron and Celebrimbor were lovers.
Oh, fuck off!
While Sauron is using Grandma Brimbor as a pincushion and torturing him, he brings up the fall of Gondolin.
Have you ever seen orcs in the heat of combat? A frenzy comes over them, blood hunger. When Gondolin fell, they say it went on for weeks.
Keep Gondolin's name out your fucking mouth!
Oh, wow! If you want to know more about it, read the book. It's fucking awesome. And it should be no surprise Amazon completely fucks up the tragic end of Celebrimbor. Canonically, his dead body is used by Sauron as a battle standard. In the Rings of Power, Grandma Brimbor goads Sauron into skewering him by spoiling the end of Lord of the Rings.
The rings of power shall destroy you, and in the end, I foresee one alone shall prove your utter ruin! Oh, come on!
And his final words, I shit you not, are calling Sauron the Lord of the Rings.
I am their master.
No, you are their prisoner. Sauron, Lord of the Rings.
What is this, amateur hour? But wait! There's more!
This is followed by Sauron crying again.
Are you him? Are you Sauron?
I have many names.
Yeah, and I guess one of them is Pussy. The last time we saw Galadriel, she was given the 9 rings for men to put their fingers in to get as far away from Region as possible. But when we catch up with our warrior of the wasteland, elven commander, slayer of orcs, girl boss, girl Barian, her dumbass is back in Region. So they can show her saving some women and little girls because men and boys don't matter. I mean, how do you expect me to believe that little 5'4" Morphic Clark is gonna save anyone? Just a reminder, Galadriel is supposed to be 6'4". Anyway, they run into some orcs and Galadriel gives herself up and offers up the 9 rings for men to put their fingers in, as long as the orcs spare the women and little girls. At this point, the only thing the orcs should be saying is,
do it, kill her! Kill her!
And everybody else and rip the rings off her dead body. Instead, the kinder and gentler orcs honor the deal and take her to Adar, who already has Nenya. And despite the ring Nenya healing Adar because Galadriel is so wonderful, he gives it back. Once again, he offers her an alliance, and this time Galadriel's going to accept.
Let this ring heal the rift between elf and orc.
What? This is followed by one of the dumbest exchanges in one of the dumbest shows ever made, and the worst misrepresentation of an adapted character in herstory.
Help me vanquish Sauron with it, and I swear to you, I will recall my children to Mordor, never to make war on Middle-earth again. What?
I have slain more of your children than any elf alive.
What the fuck? Far be it from me to point out that the Lady of Light is about to ally herself with the elf who committed genocide in the south and just sacked Region. But not to worry, because the alliance doesn't last long. You remember Glug, the hard torturing and pillaging orc who just wants to provide for his family, betrays Adar. And then he gets Caesared as Sauron looks on. And what does Galadriel do? Does she A, honor the sacrifice Celebrimbor made for her and run away as far as she can, considering she has the ring Nenya, the 9 rings for men to put their fingers in, and nobody's paying attention to her? Or B, stand around like an idiot so we can set up some stupid fight between her and Sauron? If you guessed the latter, unfortunately you have watched the Rings of Power. Meanwhile, back in Region, the battle is over. Sauron has ordered all but the commanders be killed, so what the hell is Don Lemonless doing there? And didn't he get shanked a couple of times last episode and was left dying? Well, it looks like he found a healing elixir that fixed his armor. Somehow High District Manager Gil-Gadaddy, who canonically stood toe-to-toe with the real Sauron, finds himself in an orc's chokehold. And Doogie Elrond looks on as the orcs represent Jeff Bezos' treatment of the professor's work. And wouldn't you know it, they're saved by Deus Ex Dwarves. I guess that Balrog was
barely an inconvenience.
And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, the battle of the Second Age. In this corner, weighing in at 105 pounds with her armor on, she's slain more orcs than any elf alive, the Lady of Fight, Galadriel! In the opposite corner, her opponent, can she change him? The Master of Wigs and the Dark Lord who feels really bad about it, Sensitive Sauron! Eventually, Sauron gets the best of Galadriel, and this is my favorite scene in the entire series. Now, never mind the fact, despite the Tolkien professor saying canon doesn't exist, canonically, Sauron never got near any of the elven rings. He's close to one now, and he was able to take the 9 rings for men to put their fingers in. And considering Sauron just shanked Galadriel with Morgoth's pinky ring, you may ask yourself, why doesn't he just cut the ring from her hand like Isildur does to him later? Nope, for some reason he needs her consent and he doesn't get it. Instead, Galadriel in this show fall off a cliff. That's about 2,000 or 3,000 feet high and she lands like Wile E. Coyote. Oh my god, I can't take this stupidity anymore. Let's just get it over with. The dwarves aren't bothered by the Balrog anymore, but they have some politics to deal with. Sauron fucks off with the 9 rings for men to put their fingers in. Of course, Galadriel isn't smashed into jelly, and Doogie Elrond heals her with Nenya, and we find out why. After getting their asses thoroughly kicked by the orcs, the 3 men needed to ask the woman who caused all this mess by not telling anybody Halbrand was Sauron what to do next.
What course would you advise, Commander Galadriel?
You can talk to me, you know, I'm standing right here.
And apparently her genius idea was to have High District Manager Gil-Gadady put his sword up in the air. That's it. So that wraps it up for the Rings of Power Season 2, where we got to see Isildur cry, Miriel cry, Elendil cry, Celebrimbor cry, Elrond cry, Galadriel cry, female Sam cry, female Frodo cry, Durin cry, Disa cry, and Sauron cry. Twice. Haladriel, Celebrimbor, Elrondriel, Merlindil, Isildur, and Tolkien, and female Sam and Buckwheat. But at least that's not as bad as falling around Dangalf while he spends 2 seasons trying to find a stick in his name, or watching Doogie Elrond make out with his future mother-in-law. But at least we got the answer to the biggest question of them all.
So many of us in the LGBT community see ourselves in Tolkien's writings. Any chance we'll see ourselves on the show?
He's not here, is he? As a matter of fact, he is.
Thus ends another abysmal season of the worst adaptation of a literary work of all time. A subversive, systematic, deliberate dismantling of the professor's work to reflect the Los Angeles they live in today. The only questions I have left are, who are they going to ship Galadriel with next? Maybe her husband, Celeborn. And when are they going to show the Dwarven, Elven, and Hobbit genocide? And maybe we'll get the answers to these questions when the series ends in 2030. But I'll give them credit for this. The all-female directors they had for this season proved that women can suck as much as men. So we'll end with some unsolicited advice for Jeff Bezos. You took on the Tolkien fandom, and it was an embarrassing loss. So here's what you do. Fire everybody, and anybody involved with this show above crew level should never be able to work in Hollywood again, and cancel this show. Take that money and distribute it amongst your warehouse workers. That would pump some money in the economy and make the world a better place. Or you could just continue to burn hundreds of millions of dollars. The choice is up to you. Hail to the Fellowship and fuck this show.
Nerdrotic.com.
If you like what you heard, please like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like what you heard, thank you for listening this long. I will see you in the next video.
It's done. Yes, Mr. Frodo. It's over now.